This is a bird, and today I'm going to teach you everything you need to know on how to properly control birds. Control birds. Welcome back to my once or every 3 months or so control guide video. If you've been around the channel for a bit, you already know what's about to happen, but in case you're new, today I'm going to be going over the strategy of Pidgeot control, my most recent list, and then I'm going to go over how you want to be playing into every single meta matchup. So yeah, let's just get into it. Before we get into the list, I'm sure at first glance this just looks like a complete disaster if you've never played this kind of deck before. So quickly, I want to explain what this deck's objective is. So it's not really your conventional 2-2-2 prize race deck. So bird control aims to use its various disruptive options to create an advantageous board state where we can win with one of our different sweeping options. Depending on the list, you either have 4 or 3 sweepers, those being Bloodmoon Ursaluna, Wellspring Ogerpon / Mawile, Mimikyu / Cornerstone Walling, or if you play it, Chi-Yu. So the goal is to try to either knock out specific attackers or discard enough of specific cards so we can just create a board state where one of those things can go basically unchecked. And I know that sounds kind of daunting, like there's a lot of different options at first glance. How do we really know what to do? But in some matchups, which I will explain later, there are just sweepers that aren't particularly relevant or aren't particularly likely to be relevant. And we almost always have 1 or 2 options that we're leaning pretty heavily towards, so it's not really as scary as it sounds. So now that we have a rough idea of what this deck strategy is, I'm going to explain my list and why every card is in here, since I haven't done that in a few sets. So starting things off, just the engine of the deck, what is helping us set up and actually do what we want to do, and that of course all revolves around Pidgeot. Having whatever card we want each turn is incredible. Let's just play all these one-ofs. This deck does not work without Pidgeot. We need Quick Search. Quick Search is pretty broken. Rotom is the perfect support Pokemon, help get us going. A lot of the time we don't have any attack we're using early in the game and we need to draw cards. The reason that there is 2 is because prizing one of them sucks. We're going to be going first blindly with this deck, so if we go first, play Nest Ball, and there's no Rotom in there, we're feeling pretty bad a lot of the time, so we always want it to be in there. We don't want to be missing those early draw 3s. Because if we're not drawing cards, we're usually not setting a Pidgeot, and if we're not setting a Pidgeot, we're usually not winning the game. And the other support Pokemon in here is Lumineon. Makes all of our Ultra Balls Arvens, and if all our Ultra Balls are Arvens, then that means all of our Ultra Balls are Candy for a Sealstone, so it just helps us set up Pidgeot much easier. I already sort of touched on all the different sweepers, Mimikyu, Mawile / Wellspring, Ursaluna, and Chi-Yu. So I guess the other miscellaneous random looking Pokemon, Luxray is going to be our honestly main attacker in the early game in most matchups. Fang Snipe, especially early in the game, can be pretty crippling. Lets us target resources aggressively out of our opponent's hand. Just helps set up pretty much all of our different win conditions. It has a pretty awkward amount of HP as well, so we usually can like put a charm or something on it. It can tank a hit. We can loop that with Penny and get a ton of value out of it. Even if it's not directly sniping good cards out of our opponent's hand, usually it forces our opponent to aggressively extend resources to deal with it, so either way it's getting some sort of value. Genesect is a really insane option to have to shut off Prime Catcher. It's pretty much only going to be coming down against Prime Catcher decks, but just taking away an easy gust and a switch effect for very little cost of our own is almost always going to be really worth it. Sandshrew is pretty much just here for shutting off Pal Pad, so in those matchups where we don't want our opponent getting back those supporter cards, Sandshrew is going to be very good, and it's just a little one prize guy, so if our opponent is gusting that down to be able to use Pal Pad, we're really not super upset. Regieleki definitely stands out as one of the stranger cards in this deck, because if you look at the rest of the list, there is no Silene. So Regieleki represents our only way of being able to recover cards from our discard pile aside from Pal Pad and Night Stretcher. And the reason why I like Regieleki over something like a Silene is because this format is so fast, we don't usually have time to play Silene. And also there's the chance if we do find a turn to play Silene, it could just not do anything at all, and we just wasted our supporter effect for the turn. So Regieleki allows us to play a little more proactively, lets us play Disruption Supporter and recover in the same turn. Yeah, the card's pretty good. It's definitely one of the harder cards to use in the list. You have to be really looking for the right moments to utilize it, and sometimes you have to force it active. So it's hard to use, but I do think it's worth it. It's a pretty good card. The split of Mawile and Ogerpon may seem kind of goofy, but there is a reason for it. Mawile is cool because it's a single prizer. If our opponent spends a switch to get out of Retreat Lock, they're only taking 1 prize. Mawile also only has 1 colorless attack cost, so it's not requiring a double turbo energy to attack. So if you do prize a DTE or use one early in the game on something like a Luxray attack, you're not just unable to sob for the rest of the game. And one thing you'll notice is there is no Misfortune Sisters in this list, which sort of the reason why is Misfortune Sisters is an inherently random card. It's not getting value as often as we'd like. So instead of playing a random card with the hope that it gets value, why aren't we just taking a line that's getting guaranteed value? So instead of just playing Sisters hoping that we rip a switch, why don't we just use Mawile? No, it forces out a switch, and it only allows 1 prize, so then we can go into Ogerpon or another Mawile after that. Ogerpon is still here because having a tankier Retreat Lock option is pretty useful some of the time, and having the 2 of them also puts a lot less of the strain on our Night Stretcher and Thorton, so we don't just like have to seek out those if we need to Retreat Lock multiple times in a game. So after that, the supporter count, Arven's pretty self-explanatory. It's just a very powerful consistency card. It's also pretty useful in the mid and late game, just getting various pieces. Penny, another pretty self-explanatory card. A lot of our annoying attacking options need to be reused after they tank a hit, so Penny is just the most convenient, easy way to do that. Eri, great disruption supporter, lets us aggressively take item cards out of our opponent's hand, and usually items are some of those most important resources that we're trying to get rid of. Boss, just supporter gust, always pretty good, can be reused with Pal Pad, so is a nice option to have other than counter catcher. Thorton, just recovery is pretty important, can be reused with Pal Pad, and also in a lot of these Dusknoir matchups, our Pidgey gets targeted pretty aggressively early in the game, so sometimes it can be hard to set up a Pidgeot, but Thorton does give us an avenue of being able to cheat it and play all in 1 turn, so we can get around our opponent's aggressive board wipes early on. Iono, early game consistency, late game comebacks, pretty broken card. Giacomo helps us against all those decks that are playing special energies right now, mainly Terrapagos and Lugia, but sometimes Charizard if they're playing Mist Energy. Xerosic is a card that got a lot of hype initially for control decks before it released and really hasn't seen a ton of play, but in this format there's a lot of decks that get really big hand sizes, so something like an Eri or a Fang Snipe doesn't really feel super effective, but if they have a 13 card hand and we're Xerosic them down to 3, there's almost certainly going to be more than 3 cards in their hand that they want to keep. Very powerful disruptive option in the right spot, and also it does mean that we do not need to have an infinite deck because we always have Xerosics into Iono to have more cards left than our opponent, so we don't have to worry about decking up first since we don't play Silene. One of the last additions I have into the deck before Louisville Regionals was an Erica's Invitation, and Retreat Lock is a very powerful win condition in this format, but most of the time it is pretty hard to pull off because our opponent can play around it. Like if they don't want to make it a win condition for us, they don't have to. They can just choose to play the game a lot slower, and we really don't have a ton of ways to work around that. But Erica's lets us be able to force that win con in certain spots, just gives us more options. And at the very least, if they know Erica's exist, they have to like Ultra Ball away their liabilities and play a lot differently than they would if we didn't have Erica's. So now for the items for Nest Ball, for Ultra Ball, we just need to be consistent. We need to set up. We're going first, so we don't get access to Arven, so we need to be able to get our board of Pidgey and Rotom on that first turn. Counter catcher is broken. Item-based Gust, super good. We're going to be behind almost all of the games, so really no point in not running a heavy counter catcher accounts. 2 Pal Pads because we need to recover our supporters pretty aggressively a lot of the time. Usually need to reuse a lot of those 1-ofs in order to win the game. Rare Candy, self-explanatory. We got to get Pidgeot. That's the whole that's how this deck works. Heavy Ball, we play a bunch of 1-ups. Heavy Ball makes a ton of sense. Night Stretcher, we oftentimes need to reuse these 1-ups, so it's just more versatile than playing like a second copy of Luxray or something. Buddy Poffin, it's just another consistency card. Lets us get double Pidgey, which is pretty good into a lot of those Dusknoir decks. You can let us get like Pidgey Mimikyu, double Mimikyu, Pidgey Sandshrew. Yeah, just another versatile consistency card. Lost Vacuum serves as our only stadium bump in this list aside from Pidgeot's attack. It's much more accessible off of Arven, unlike something like Artisan that we only could find off a quick search. It also does have the versatility of being able to get rid of tool cards in certain spots, and since it's an immediate use rather than we have to wait for it to get bounced, if it's a matchup like Dragapult where we want to get rid of their crystal with the Lost Vacuum, but we sort of have to be careful because we need to save that vacuum for later because they play Sinnoh or League Headquarters or something, we can use that vacuum to get rid of their crystal and then use Lecky to immediately grab back that lost vacuum. So we're able to get rid of their crystal, force more energies out, but also be able to maintain our stadium bounce for later. Bravery Charm, almost all of our strategies revolve around our basic Pokemon tanking hits, so being able to give them more HP just makes a ton of sense. Force Seal Stun, goated consistency, we don't have another V-Star power, so really there's no point in not playing it. Hero Cape is the A spec that makes the most sense because, like, we need our Pidgeot to be a little more sturdy a lot of the time. 380 HP is pretty tough for a lot of things to get through. Control decks in the past have played things like Survival Brace, but that card has gotten pretty less valuable now that Dusknoir is in format and can easily cheat around that protection. So Hero Cape is by far the best A spec, and I really can't see the deck playing anything else right now. And then for the energies, Mist Energy, it's kind of just a tech card that's also a colorless energy in some spots. You know, to block Lost Mine or Devo or Dragapult. He is just pretty good. It's usually going to be ending up on Pidgeot. I mean, sometimes we'll end up on Mawile, Regieleki, or just paying Retreat if that's what we need it to do. The double turbo energy lets us attack with Luxray, Ogerpon, Ursaluna, even Pidgeot in some spots. And then the one fire energy allows us to be able to mill with Chi-Yu. Now that the list is out of the way and we have an idea of what the cards are in here for, I want to talk about the matchups and give you at least an idea of how you want to be routing these matchups, what our preferred sweeper is going to be, and then what our backup options are if something else opens up or our first option is just not working. So first off, I want to start with the most popular deck in the format, and that is Raging Bolt. I feel like Bolt is a matchup people play wrong most consistently with Control, because the way you play it is kind of unconventional. Something that is sort of universally true against all Raging Bolt lists is Mimikyu is a very annoying attacker to deal with. Some lists play Slitherwing, some lists play Sandy Shocks, some play Dusknoir, or some play no sort of single prize answer at all. So our game plan is almost always going to revolve around Mimikyu as our main sweeping option. And I play this matchup a lot like Snorlax style, honestly. I fill up my board with Mimikyus and single prize Pokemon. I try to go as long as possible without benching multi-prizers, because the whole point is to make our opponent have to work as hard as possible to take these KOs around Mimikyu or get through as many Mimikyus as possible. So if we're putting down Rotom or putting down Pidgeot really early, that's just less work that they have to do to win the game. Sometimes if our opening hand is kind of bad, we do have to put down Rotom or Pidgeot anyway, but we're just trying to minimize those liabilities if we can. So yeah, we're going to have a board full of Mimikyus, Genesect, Pidgey, Sandshrew, all those friends to make things as hard as possible. So what they're going to do is either just spend their Pokemon catchers, their bosses, to take those little one prize knockouts, but eventually they're either going to run out of Gus or just move that Raging Bolt back into whatever single prize attacker they have is. Sandy Shocks is definitely the most annoying one to deal with because it is pretty efficient at dealing with Mimikyus. But everything else is so much more manageable. Like the Slitherwing is putting constant damage on itself and is not one-shotting a Cape's Mimikyu. So after they go back into their answer and start punching into our Mimikyus, we want to just start counter-catching up those Raging Bolts that they have on the bench and force them to either keep committing energies to retreat or burn switches to get back into their single prize attacker. So this opens up multiple different win conditions that we could potentially exploit. If they burn through all their energies, then Bloodmoon Ursaluna could be a pretty solid finisher. If they just do not have enough resources to deal with it in the end game. If they burn through all their switches instead of retreating off energies, then Retreat Lock becomes a potential win condition, or they could just get stuck behind a Raging Bolt as well, and we don't even need to retreat lock. Since that 3 retreat is pretty annoying for them to pay constantly. So really the only ways you want to sort of vary it from this game plan is sometimes we have to start off too slow, we have to bench too many 2 prizes to set up, and we're just not able to effectively wall with Mimikyu. And in those games, we do have to depend on like Iono plus Bloodmoon Ursaluna's comeback option, which sometimes work if their board isn't super developed. But it's pretty unreliable because by the end game, most of the time, all their cards either draw more cards or the cards that they want to see, so it's pretty hard to stick them with a hand just of unplayables. Or another weird line that they can choose to do is just not KO our Mimikyus and just start spamming the mill attack with Slitherwing. And if they do this, we can just try to establish our board a little bit while they're not putting any kind of pressure on us, and we actually can put down Pidgeot and then just start pressuring their hands, either with something like a Luxray or using Chi-Yu to put pressure on their deck. So if they want to one-shot that guy, they have to retreat off all 3 energies off that Slitherwing, then Sada, load up another Raging Bolt, and dump a bunch of energies to KO that guy. So it creates kind of a weird board state, forces a lot of resources out, and then they did take some prize cards, so we can continue on our Mimikyu counter catcher game plan. So overall, I'd say the Bolt matchup is pretty manageable, but it definitely is pretty tricky if you don't know what you're doing and are just freely dropping 2 prizers that are going to get eaten up by Bellowing Thunders. So just as a rule, try to be extremely cautious dropping those 2 prizers. Force your opponent to work as hard as possible to take those 6 prizes, and you should be okay. So after Raging Bolt, got Charizard, which has been routinely one of Control's strongest matchups in previous formats, but the Dusk line really shifted everything. Like looking at this Charizard list, which is pretty typical Zard 60, none of our sweepers really appear to be really that great of options at first glance. Like if we go in with Mimikyu, they still have their entire Dusk line, which can make quick work of it, and if we're just sitting there walling, we're not putting pressure on their board in any other way, so there's really nothing stopping them from piecing together some sort of crazy combo and chasing our Pidgeots. And once Pidgeot's gone, our whole deck kind of falls apart after it. So you may think, well, Retreat Lock has to be the way to go. There's a lot of those liability Pokemon that can't attack in their deck, but they still have Turos and Thorton to get those guys out of play. So really that doesn't work effectively either. And then for Chi-Yu and Ursaluna looping are both kind of hit and miss. Ursaluna doesn't seem all that great because we're never going to be a better prize card deck than Charizard is. And I feel like that's one of the biggest mistakes I see in this matchup is Charizard may have kind of a weak start and you go into like Blustery Wind and you may even take like 2, 3, 4, 5 prizes off of it. But as long as you set up 1 Charizard, you pretty much lose the game because they'll just knock out all your Pokemon in one shot and you can't ever piece together that final prize or couple prizes. So taking prizes is almost always a trap, so Ursaluna is off the table. And then Chi-Yu looping is fine, but they do have the Dusk line to buff up their damage and make quick work of Chi-Yu. So really, how do we go about this matchup? They have answers for everything. We're going to have to heavily lean on Luxray as our first attacker of the game once we get Pidgeot set up to sort of set the table for all of our other win conditions. If we manage to get rid of Boss's Orders or recovery cards, Mimikyu becomes a pretty strong option if they can't gust around it or use their recovery to loop a ton of different Dusknors. If we manage to snipe those Turos or Thorton, they could just be unable to move their Pokemon, and Retreat Lock could become our win condition. And also using Fang Stick, we do get information to tell us if Erica is a good play, which also could help us accomplish a Retreat Lock win con. And another thing to monitor is how they use their energy cards. Most Charizard lists are on 5 Fires and 1 Mist Energy, so if they do commit a lot of Fire Energies in play, we can constantly gust up Pokemon and force retreats and leave them with certain board states without energies, so they have to either aggressively spend recovery to keep retreating their Pokemon or use their switch effects supporters, which could open up some sort of potential opportunity. They will probably respond into that Luxray with a Dusk plus Charizard combo to knock it out, and then after that we sort of just have to piece together what we can based on what we manage to discard. So it will usually be sending a Mimikyu after that, because ideally we hit some bosses or recoveries to mitigate their Dusknor. And it's important that we have 2 Mimikyus in play, just so if they Curse Blast through one of them, we can send up another after that, so they don't just get some free prize. But if we do manage to get rid of those Turo/Thornton, then Retreat Lock could be a win con as well. So it's a very sketchy matchup. If we do not manage to get those early snipes off, they set up cleanly, manage to hide their resources. Something like a TM Devo or a Cornerstone could help us out, but those cards are just pretty bad in every other matchup, and Charizard has definitely fallen off this format compared to where it's been in previous formats, so it doesn't really seem like a super appealing deck to tech for, but you definitely can make the matchup a lot better if you do choose to tech for it. After Charizard, I want to talk about Dragapult because our options are quite similar in this matchup as well. I will be more focusing on the Dusknor build of Dragapult because I believe that to be the better one, but I'll briefly mention the Pidgeot build as well. So at first glance at this Dusk list, Retreat Lock just jumps off the page as an incredibly powerful option with just the 1 switch. it does not seem very difficult at all to just lock a Rotom, Lumineon, or Tatsugiri just out of the game. So that's where Erica really comes in. There's really nothing forcing our opponent to put down one of those Pokemon that can attack, but with Erica's, they have no choice. So Retreat Lock is always going to be that priority number one sweeping option if you can get it off before they take too many prizes. Because if you get it super late in the game and they still have most of their Dusk line available, they could still take prizes while they Retreat Lock. So do keep that in mind, that even if the option presents itself later, if they take on enough prizes, it still might not be worth going for. So then, looking at our other options at this list, Mimikyu seems okay, but like Charizard, the Dusknoir line is pretty scary, and if we're being passive, our Pidgeot is at pretty high risk of being just taken out. But unlike Charizard, taking prizes is a massively more appealing option against Dragapult, since their damage output just doesn't scale like Zard's does. So Bloodmoon Ursaluna is actually a super appealing attacker if we can use it to clear Duskulls off the board and limit their ability to one-shot us. So if we can create the endgame board state of like Mist Energy Pidgeot with Cape on it, and then use Ursaluna to keep chasing their Duskulls, it's very possible that they can just sort of be stuck without a play. They're just constantly bashing into our Ursaluna for 200 a turn, but we can just keep penny looping it up and take our remaining prizes. So it's really going to be those two game plans that we're targeting. If we can pull off the Retreat Lock early enough, go for that. But if not, try to go for that Bloodmoon Ursaluna loop game plan. And our early game will usually consist of like Luxray Fang Snipe or Chi-Yu Milling to try to limit those recovery options or gust options to just further ensure that Ursaluna is going to be a powerful option. So I feel like explaining it that way makes the matchup sound super easy, but this matchup can really spiral out of control if you start slow. Dragapult's probably the best at preying on small Pokemon early in the game. So assuming everything lines up well, it should be pretty easy to take care of Dragapult, but you really don't have a ton of margin for error. If you get a slow start, then sometimes there's not a whole lot you can do. Editor Blitzel here. I totally did not forget to mention something about Dragapult Pidgeot. It's going to be playing very similar with Retreat Lock and Ursaluna Loop being our primary win conditions, with kind of Mimikyu also as sort of another thing that exists. Since the Pidgeot lists aren't always playing Dusk, they can't get through Ursaluna as easily, they can't get through Mimikyu as easily. They do sometimes play Turos, which is a lot more annoying than just a switch, so do be careful of that when going for a Retreat Lock. Like, a Retreat Lock isn't as much of a slam dunk in that matchup as it is versus the Dusk build, but they usually don't have as thick of a Dusk line or play Dusk at all, so Ursaluna is pretty broken if you can get all that set up, get rid of their Gust and stuff. As much as I don't really enjoy doing it, I guess we should talk about the Dusk matchups next. We'll start off with Terapagos. And these matchups feel pretty volatile. If we go first, we should be fine. We get time to set up. Things will be okay. If we go second, our board's probably going to get destroyed, and we're not having very good of a time. So yeah, that was kind of like the motivation to build this deck to go blind first, because the Dusk decks are so oppressive against us if they manage to go first. So looking at this Terapagos list, they do not play a ton of switch effects. Like, that's the thing that immediately jumps out to me as a potential exploit for us. So we can kind of capitalize on this by going like Counter Catcher up and Noctowl, Giacomo away and Energy, and then they're sort of left without much of a great option because they can't really attach retreats, they can't relive energy on like a bench Terapagos, or it gets also discarded again, so they're just kind of stuck there. And if you like combine this with Luxray or Chi-Yu at the same time, we're putting a ton of pressure on their deck or hand and forcing them to sort of assemble some sort of combo pretty quickly. Or also we could just use Regieleki and immediately grab back the Giacomo as well if we didn't have the Chi-Yu or Luxray play available. We can just do this several times, and once they maybe can get through once by playing a switch, because we'll have Genesect down to deny a Prime Catcher. It's pretty hard for them to use two Dusks to KO a Genesect. So that like lock strategy is kind of our main plan, but we do have other options, but I guess really all of them revolve around limiting Dusknoirs. Mimikyu is a decent option if Dusknoirs are limited in some way, but with 4 Candy, 3 Night Stretcher, it's pretty hard to create a board state where Mimikyu can just go unchecked. And kind of like the Dragapult matchup, if we can create a board state with only one Duskull that we're constantly chasing, we can set it up that Ursaluna or even Pidgeot can get a ton of value. Something that can happen occasionally in the matchup is they end up popping 2 Dusk, so we're at 4 prizes. And then we can use our Bloodmoon Ursaluna to KO their lone Duskull, go down to 3. They cannot one-shot us, so that they can just hit us with Terapagos. Not enough damage. Then we can penny up our Ursaluna, KO their Terapagos, and then we're down at 1 prize left. So they still can't one-shot us, and even if they did get a Duskull down that previous turn, they cannot use it now that we're at 1 prize. So we can kind of set up like a pseudo Ursaluna sweep. If they are only limited to just 1 Duskull on the board. We do have solid lines in this matchup. It can just kind of all go off the rails if we cannot get Pidgeot set up. So do sort of keep that Thorton play in the back of your mind as an option if both of our Pidgeys get wiped on the first turn. And we can do what we can to protect them, like cape on Pidgey or bench Genesect early on, just to try to give ourselves the best chance possible of being able to play the game. So now let's jump over to Palkia Dusknoir. Just like Terapagos, we need to be going first or preparing our board accordingly, just so we hopefully don't get board wiped. Our early game is of course going to consist of Luxray ripping the heck out of their hands. We just need to reduce Dusknoirs in some capacity. If they can do a lot of those very quickly, it is very bad. But after the Dusknoirs have been limited in some capacity, that's when things get really interesting, because they don't have great gust options, they don't have great switch options, especially if we have Genesect down. So Retreat Lock can be a very appealing win con based on what their board looks like. They usually can't use all 7 of their energies, like they could Pokestop or Concealed Card it away. So if even if they're Retreat Locking something like a Mew or a Fez that can't attack, and it forces like triple energy onto them, that's energies that are probably coming out of this card pile, so that forces Night Stretcher out of them. And we can like try to spread enough energies out that we can create a board state where they just have something left active that has no energy on it and can't attack. Mimikyu is another decent option if we can limit their Dusks to just force them to pop Dusks into just a single prizer instead of just like dumping them on Pidgeots. And it could also bait out Radiant Greninja, which can also get Retreat Locked itself. So yeah, overall it's not too bad. Like there's going to be some sort of flaw in their board state that we can exploit most of the time. If it's got like a super thin board, we probably can do something aggressive with like either Ursaluna or Pidgeot to sweep them just like we can against any other Dusknoir deck. But of course it still shares the problem of we can't just get board wiped if we don't start off super fast or go first. So even though our lines are solid, we're kind of always at the mercy of the coin flip. So now that we got all that Dusknoir doom and gloom out of the way, let's talk about a couple auto wins. And first, Quad Thorns. We just want to put down all 3 of our Mimikyus and make them show us more than 2 Colognes. Thorns is almost always playing 0 or 2 Colognes. We should just instantly win on the spot with 3 Mimikyus. If they are playing more than 3 Colognes for some odd reason, we can still try to snipe stuff with Eri and maybe even Luxray in certain situations to try to get rid of at least one of those. So yeah, just put down three Mimikyus. Don't go crazy through the deck, so you deck out first, and you should just always win. Then the other auto wins, Snorlax Stall, another one that feels pretty impossible to lose. We have a plethora of options. We can Chi-Yu mill them out. We can Luxray snipe their end over and over again. We can infinitely Lecky loop, so we can never deck out. Yeah, the list just goes on and on. Like we even can just sit there and do nothing all game, then go Xerosic their entire hand away, then play Iono, force them to draw their entire deck. Yeah, like literally the only way you can lose is if you bench Pidgeot and it gets stuck and they fan away the energy and things. So just don't put down Pidgeot, put down Sandshrew, and then either be Leckying, Chi-Yuing, or Luxraying, and you should be easy win, free, yes, good. Next, I want to do Drago, and you know how earlier I was saying about how we like play Bolt, kind of like stall, we just chill with our Mimikyus. I feel like a lot of people try to do that in this matchup, and it doesn't really work because they just have way more options. They have the Sinnoh Mew combo, they have Canceling Cologne, they have Noctowl, and they have Legacy Star, so don't do that. There are better options. Well, Mimikyu is a solid threat, it keeps them honest, makes them have to like respect it. Our board state's almost always going to be set up with Pidgeot with Cape and Mist Energy on it, Genesect with whatever tool on it, and then whatever other sweeper we have in the active spot, if we're retreat locking, or if we're blood moon looping, or maybe if we're just chilling with Mimikyu because they use boss's orders or cancel and clone up in the early game. So if they go a super wide board with several things that can be retreat locked, then that's going to be the way to go. If they go for a thin board without anything that can be retreat locked, then it's probably going to be a blood moon angle. Of course, Luxray as an early game option, if they're playing slowly, can be very, very good. We don't really have too much else aside from that. I mean, going first is important so we don't get all our Pidgeys wiped before we can do much of anything. But as long as these lists aren't playing Jamming Tower, Ursaluna just seems like such a reliable option as long as we set up. There's a couple cute plays to keep in mind is if we lost Vacuum away their Temple of Sinnoh, they can't Legacy Star it back. If they're stuck at like an awkward 4 prize cards and we can't use Ursaluna yet, we can use Mawile's Tempting Trap to get the plus 90 damage into their Drago next turn. And then after they KO that Mawile, we can combo it with a DTE Ursaluna one-shot on their Drago. So yeah, I feel like this matchup is extremely manageable as long as we get set up. Kind of like a lot of controls matchups to be honest, but yeah, Kate Mist, Pidgeot, Genesect, and then whatever sweeper active, and we should be chilling. So that initially was just going to be it for the matchups, but then Lost Box came out and won, or not won, almost won Louisville Regionals, so better talk about that. If you played that matchup in the past, very similar to NAIC format Lost Box, not really anything's changed too much. And like on paper, it looks kind of scary. Like they have so many of all their resources. They can load up plenty of attackers, recover those attackers, plenty of switches. But just how their deck works, they have to load up their hand and Lost Zone some of those good cards, which means they're extremely vulnerable to early game Aries and Luxrays and Xerosics. So that's pretty much going to be our plan. Yeah, Luxray and Chi-Yu are going to be incredibly powerful options, and then once we like limit their resources, we can just try to clean up whatever's left with like Ursaluna plus Iono. So really, like aside from that, we just need to make sure our board's protected well. So putting Cape on Pidgeot and a tool on Genesect just to make them have to like double vacuum in order to remove Pidgeot is a pretty good play. And like the biggest fear is just like we can get board wipes going second, so try to like have the Thorton play piece together or just some kind of protection on the Pidgeot just so you can get that Pidgey evolved up on your second turn. So like yeah, as long as we're sniping and like limiting their resources, we should just be fine. But yeah, it's like a lot of matchups, like they can go first, put down Spiritomb, wipe our board, and we can feel kind of bad. So as long as we set up, we should be winning. But they do make it a little tricky for us to set up sometimes. I definitely did not edit this video, upload it to YouTube, just to realize there was no portion about Lugia. That would just not be, no way. And anyway, the Lugia matchup. Matchup's kind of weird, because like we have no early game against Lugia, and our win conditions kind of suck. We can't retreat log because of the billion jets, have Mimikyu answers, the damage output's pretty high. So we have to limit them in some capacity, so it's either going to be like Giacomo Regieleki spam, preloading Bloodmoon on the bench to chase energies, or chase Archeops, chase rats. Yeah, so try to like prioritize those early Bloodmoon attachments, Gusto's Chops, or Lone Rat if they have it like that. And yeah, try to set up some sort of Bloodmoon sweep angle. It's kind of tough without any kind of early game because there's like nothing stopping them from just sitting there and read the winding until they have a super OP broken hand. But we can try, we can do our best. Diancie is a pretty broken deck card. For this matchup, if you feel like you're going to see it a lot, just so we can have some sort of an early game. But yeah, preload up Bloodmoon, chase the Chops and the Rats, try to set up some sort of Bloodmoon sweep. Yeah, it's fine. Lugia's a brick, trust. So yeah, that's all the matches I want to talk about. So yeah, here's this cool little graphic with our preferred sweepers, the sweepers we're most likely using in those particular matchups, as well as a potential tech card you could play in the top left. In general, I feel like tech cards are pretty bad this format because it feels very wide open, and also like the reason why control is so good is because it's very consistent and versatile, and if you're taking away consistency, I feel like you're taking away from what this deck does well. But if your locals are absolutely infested with one of these decks, there are definitely cards you can play. The Galarian Sunfisk, very goofy card, but has stream with it where I got top 4 online turn with it. Definitely has merit, even though it looks like a total meme card. But I feel like you beat a lot of decks just when you set up, so try not to get too cute with the text. Just set up, get turn 2 Pidgeot, and you'll be winning a lot of games. And yeah, if you want to get this image for yourself, I'll post it in the resources channel in my Discord, link in the description below. And yeah, that's pretty much it. That's pretty much all I have. Take a quick moment, shout out my sponsors, TC Evolutions, for providing the best quality dice counters. They got all kinds of new products, just very, very dope stuff. If you're wanting to go to a Pokemon tournament, definitely pick up some of their stuff. Their stuff's awesome. And also shout out Blue Ditto, just if you're looking for some slabs, some singles, or some sealed product, definitely check them out. Links in the description below, as well as discount codes if you want to save yourself some money and support me in the process. Yeah, I really appreciate all you guys watching. As always, feel free to drop any questions in the comment section down below, or DM me on Discord or Twitter. I'm happy to help y'all out. Yeah, I don't really have anything else to say. Another guide done. Excited to see what Surging Sparks has in store. I'm sure there'll be another guide video out, bunch of control streams. Yeah, I'll catch you guys in the next one.